Emma tried to hide her feelings for Nathan behind subtle smiles and furtive glances. However, when he discovered the notebook filled with her hidden confessions, his face hardened, and in that moment, she knew everything between them had changed forever. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Emma woke up long before her alarm that morning, her heart beating faster than usual. For a week now, she had been feeling this way, sleepless, anxious, and all because of a certain millionaire boss who wouldn't leave her thoughts. She set water to boil, made a strong cup of coffee, and sipped only a few hurried gulps before heading out. She didn't want to miss the chance to arrive at the office before everyone else, especially before him. The cold morning air awakened Emma's senses. The company building, tall and gleaming, looked dormant as she passed through reception. The security guard, who saw her arrive early every day, nodded with a slight smile, recognizing her nearly obsessive punctuality ritual. She returned the gesture with a timid wave and headed toward the elevator. Reaching the executive floor, a certain unease gripped her. A bulletin board displayed goals and deadlines that never seemed to empty. Every week brought new demands, and Emma always managed to handle them. But lately, it hadn't been easy. The spreadsheets, analyses, meetings, nothing flowed with the same clarity as before. She blamed herself for it. Her focus was entirely on Nathan, the CEO who had the power to unsettle her with just a glance. Emma settled into her small cubicle next to windows letting in the gray light of dawn. She opened her email and began sorting through old messages, trying to organize herself. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop wondering what it would be like to see him. Would he arrive early too? Would he notice her presence there? She thought about all the times she had nearly run into him in the hallways, her legs trembling each time. The sound of precise footsteps in the corridor announced someone's approach. Before looking up, Emma heard a sigh that hinted at exhaustion. She glanced quickly, and there he was, Nathan, impeccably dressed in a sharp suit, looking like he hadn't slept well in days. He walked past, heading to his office without saying a word, but not without glancing briefly in Emma's direction, as if confirming her presence. Her heart leaped, even though the exchange was so fleeting and discreet. She tried to focus on her work. There were overdue spreadsheets that needed reviewing, but when the phone rang, her hands trembled, almost knocking over her coffee mug. A well-meaning but nosy colleague asked if Emma had any updates on a recent project. She answered in a distracted tone, feeling her face flush, terrified that someone might notice something was off. It was too hard to pretend everything was fine. After hanging up, Emma got up to fetch more coffee. As she walked through the corridor, she came across a large poster highlighting the company's upcoming goals. A massive sales target, multiple international contracts, and Nathan at the center of it all. He was the driving force behind the entire operation. She sighed, wondering if she should let go of her feelings to avoid jeopardizing her career. But it was too late. She was already in too deep. As she returned to her cubicle with a fresh cup of coffee, she nearly bumped into Danny, a friend and confidant. Danny gave her a worried look. "Are you okay?" she whispered, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. "You look pale and nervous." "I think I'm just tired," Emma lied, avoiding eye contact. "But I'll be fine." Danny wasn't convinced, but sensed it wasn't the right moment to press further. She walked away, leaving Emma to breathe for a moment. Emma returned to her desk and opened her inbox again, mustering the courage to tackle high-priority messages. She was slightly startled to see an email from Nathan requesting a report on a subject she didn't fully understand yet. Her palms sweated. The last thing she wanted was to disappoint him, especially now, when she could barely keep her head straight. Trying to calm herself, Emma began gathering the data she needed. She pulled information from various departments, compiled tables, and wrote explanatory paragraphs. The work ebbed and flowed between moments of insecurity until another message popped up, this time from Nathan's secretary, asking Emma to come to his office immediately. The hallway leading to Nathan's imposing office door felt longer than ever. Emma's heart pounded wildly. When she arrived, she took a deep breath before knocking. The secretary gestured for her to enter. Inside, the room was heavy with silence. Nathan sat at his desk, his tie slightly loosened, the dark circles under his eyes accentuating his intense gaze. He began talking about Emma's recent performance. His tone wasn't exactly harsh, but there was a tinge of disappointment. He mentioned how she had been losing momentum over the past weeks, the accumulating missed deadlines, her insecurity in meetings. He asked if something personal was affecting her work. Emma didn't know how to respond. A part of her wanted to scream that she was in love with him, that she daydreamed about him daily, and that it was wrecking her ability to stay focused. But she restrained herself, muttering only vague phrases, avoiding specifics. She felt utterly ashamed. Nathan then made a brief comment about his own recent past, hinting at an engagement that didn't happen. There was pain in his voice, and Emma caught a glimpse of his vulnerability. He spoke almost absent-mindedly, but it was enough to make the room feel heavier. It was as if he was subtly revealing that he had his own share of struggles and wasn't in the best position to handle someone else's problems. Emma swallowed hard, promising to do better. She assured him she would take the report seriously and find a way to regain her performance. Nathan nodded, ending the conversation formally. She left the office feeling like she had failed, as a professional and as a woman. It was terrible to see the disappointment on his face. Back at her cubicle, Emma sank into her chair. She stared at the screen, where a blank document awaited the data for Nathan's report. A new message had arrived, notifying her that the deadline was by the end of the day. Her chest tightened. She needed to find strength from somewhere. With determination, she began typing, summoning every ounce of focus she had left. Slowly, she immersed herself in the statistics and spreadsheets, revising each item to provide Nathan with a clear overview of the project. She worked without pause until the daylight started to shift, signaling that the afternoon was slipping away. Finally, when she felt she could no longer stand from exhaustion, Emma compiled the last of the graphs and saved the file. She looked at the clock and realized she had barely met the deadline. A sigh of relief escaped her lips, but a knot formed in her throat. Something inside her whispered that, even after completing the report, the avalanche of challenges was far from over. Gazing out the window, she watched as the soft evening light enveloped the city. The streetlights began to flicker on, and her reflection in the glass revealed a conflicted woman struggling to hide emotions that were impossible to suppress. A growing fear lingered that all those feelings would spill over at the worst possible moment. Still, she tried to maintain her resolve. She had to prove to herself, and to Nathan, that she could handle her responsibilities, even with a shattered heart. Silently, she nurtured the hope that this would be enough for him to see her value as a person, not just a cog in the corporate machine. With trembling hands, Emma shut down her monitor, gathered the papers she had used for reference, and exhaled deeply. The tension and anticipation seemed to saturate the air around her. Though she had finished her task for the moment, she had a sinking feeling that this wouldn't be her last serious conversation with Nathan. Emma closed her computer, taking a deep breath and making a firm decision. She would complete the report to prove her worth, but deep down, she sensed the worst was yet to come. Emma spent the night tossing and turning, her mind racing with thoughts of the deadline she had to meet. Sleep didn't come easily as she replayed the events of the previous day, particularly the moment she left Nathan's office, carrying a mix of relief and apprehension. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were chaotic, filled with Nathan's disappointed gaze and stacks of reports piling up around her. The next morning, she woke up feeling more exhausted than before she had gone to bed, but managed to summon the courage to face the day. Upon arriving at the office, Emma immediately sat at her desk, determined to finish the report she had been working on. This step was critical to prove her competence. Her heart still raced when she remembered Nathan's comments about her performance. He hadn't been harsh, but his words made it clear he expected more from her. She couldn't allow herself to fail again. Hours passed as she focused on spreadsheets, meticulously reviewing every piece of data. Occasionally, she jotted notes in a small notebook she used for brainstorming ideas, or sometimes scribbling stray thoughts. It was there that fragments of her feelings for Nathan occasionally slipped out, a risky habit, but one that provided her with a strange sense of relief. By mid-morning, Emma decided to print some data to better organize the rest of her report. She loaded the files onto a USB drive and walked down the hallway toward the communal printer near the meeting room. As the machine churned out the pages, her mind wandered back to the previous day, particularly to Nathan's expression. Tired yet tinged with something she couldn't quite place. A mix of frustration and sadness, perhaps an echo of his failed engagement. Later, while returning with the printed papers, a colleague stopped her to discuss a contract. Distracted by the conversation, Emma didn't notice a cart left in the middle of the hallway. She tripped over it, scattering her papers everywhere. The noise drew attention, and several co-workers rushed to help her. As she tried to get up, her heel nearly snapped, making the situation even more chaotic. Blushing with embarrassment, Emma thanked those who helped her gather the scattered papers. At that moment, she noticed Nathan watching from a distance. He approached, crouching down to retrieve some sheets that had slid under the cart. Their eyes met briefly, and Emma's heart raced. She managed a polite, grateful smile, trying not to show how flustered she was. Nathan said little, just handed her the stack of papers, gave a small nod to check if she was okay, and moved on. Yet even that brief interaction left her feeling strangely reassured. His concern, though subtle, seemed genuine. Back at her desk, Emma carefully reviewed the documents to ensure none were damaged, then returned to work. She was determined to complete the report before lunch. Danny, her friend and co-worker, stopped by to check if she was okay after the fall. Emma waved it off, saying she was more embarrassed than hurt, though her tense demeanor didn't go unnoticed. "You need a break," Danny said, dropping a small treat on Emma's desk. "Try eating something." Emma barely touched it, too focused on finishing her report. The pressure to meet the deadline kept her on edge. However, she managed to send the completed report to Nathan a few minutes before the deadline. For a fleeting moment, she felt relief. She closed her eyes and let out a deep breath, savoring the small victory. But her relief was short-lived. Minutes later, a notification popped up on her screen, summoning her to Nathan's office. She stood up quickly, wiping her sweaty palms on her skirt, and made her way down the corridor with her mind racing. Upon entering, she saw Nathan reviewing the printed report, marking notes here and there. His raised eyebrow at certain points made her stomach churn. "Good work," he said succinctly. "You've addressed the issues from yesterday. Thank you." Emma felt a warm surge of satisfaction. She wanted to smile but restrained herself to a modest nod. She half expected him to comment on her earlier fall or ask about her well-being, but instead, he neatly stacked the papers, signaling that the professional discussion was over. Just as she thought the meeting had concluded, his eyes landed on something on his desk, a small notebook. Her notebook. The cover was slightly ajar, revealing some recent scribbles. Emma's heart sank. Had she accidentally left it mixed in with the documents she handed over? Panic set in as Nathan picked it up, flipping through a few pages. His expression shifted from curiosity to mild confusion. "What's this?" he asked, holding up the notebook. "It's just a personal journal," Emma stammered, her face flushing. "I use it to jot down ideas." Nathan turned a few more pages, and her breath hitched. He might have seen some of the emotional entries, filled with initials, fragmented thoughts, and even a few hastily drawn hearts. "These notes seem romantic," he said, his brow furrowing. Emma's mind went blank. She couldn't let him connect the dots. Desperation took over, and before she could think, she blurted, "It's about my boyfriend, Enrique. Enrique Iglesias. The absurdity of her excuse hit her immediately. Nathan's expression was unreadable, caught somewhere between disbelief and amusement. Without a word, he closed the notebook and handed it back to her. "Understood," he said, his tone guarded. "Sorry for invading your privacy." Emma snatched the notebook, her mind spinning. She muttered a quick thank you for his feedback and fled the office, her pulse pounding. Back at her desk, she slumped into her chair, clutching the notebook like a lifeline. She couldn't believe she'd invented a fictional boyfriend and named him after a global pop star, no less. Later, as she prepared to leave for the day, Emma received a notification on her phone. "Meeting scheduled for tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Personal request from the CEO." Nathan's name was listed as the organizer. Her stomach churned as she stepped into the elevator, her thoughts spiraling. Tomorrow's meeting loomed like a storm cloud, and Emma had no idea what to expect. Emma woke up feeling unusually anxious that day, after spending the entire night fretting over the meeting scheduled for 8:30. As soon as she stepped into the office, she tried to keep her head held high, but deep down, she feared what awaited her in Nathan's office. The events of the previous day still lingered in her mind, tripping over the papers, handing in the report at the last minute, and, most embarrassingly, claiming she was involved with none other than Enrique Iglesias. She hurried down the hallway, greeted a few colleagues with subtle nods, and finally reached the CEO's door. She barely had to knock. The secretary, as serious as ever, motioned for her to enter. Inside, the atmosphere felt different, charged with an unusual tension. Nathan sat at his desk, adjusting some notes, and when Emma stood before him, he remained silent for a few moments, glancing at her from the corner of his eye. She could sense something in the air, as if he were testing her reactions. He began by pointing out minor typos in the report she had submitted, highlighting details that would normally go unnoticed. Emma realized that more than correcting her work, he was probing her state of mind. He spoke softly, without the harshness typical of a boss demanding perfection, but with an incisiveness that left her uneasy. With each sentence he veered slightly off topic, as though fishing for hidden confessions. "By the way, about your boyfriend, Enrique. Did he see your report?" Nathan asked, flipping a page in his notes. Emma held her breath. She hadn't expected the conversation to veer so quickly toward the topic she most wanted to avoid. Swallowing hard, she tried not to show her surprise, but his tone of curiosity was unmistakable. The mention of Enrique Iglesias sounded absurdly out of place in such a corporate setting. "Actually, he's been so busy," Emma improvised. "We barely have time to talk about my work. But yes, he's aware of everything." Nathan nodded, but his gaze seemed deeper than usual, as if trying to unmask her. Emma felt her palms begin to sweat. Was it time to come clean? She hesitated. She wasn't ready yet. Standing there, under the cold light filtering through the blinds, left her feeling too vulnerable. Memories of Nathan's failed engagement also loomed in the air, making Emma pause. Maybe she was complicating the life of someone who had already suffered enough. When he finally wrapped up the discussion, Nathan also ended the meeting, as though there was nothing else to address. He said he was keeping an eye on her performance and hoped she would continue improving. Emma left, slightly dazed, and returned to her desk. Sitting down, she exhaled deeply as she opened her computer, still trembling inside. "So, how did it go?" Danny asked, approaching cautiously. "What did he say?" Emma shrugged, describing the conversation in brief. She seemed too exhausted to delve into details. Danny, sensing something heavy on Emma's mind, pulled up a chair beside her. "You look awful," she said, half joking but with genuine concern. "Want to tell me what's going on?" Emma glanced around, wary of anyone overhearing. Then she leaned closer to Danny and whispered, "I lied. I told Nathan I have a boyfriend, and not just any boyfriend. Enrique Iglesias." Danny, stunned, clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a startled laugh. Emma blushed furiously but pressed on, explaining how it all happened so quickly in Nathan's office, her notebook full of romantic musings, the panic of being found out, and the impulsive lie she had blurted out. Danny blinked repeatedly, trying to process the absurdity of it all. "You told him you're dating Enrique Iglesias?" she whispered incredulously. "Emma, what kind of mess have you gotten yourself into?" Emma shook her head, wishing she could crawl into a hole. "I don't know what came over me. I was desperate. The notebook. He might have realized I write about Nathan, so I just said the first thing that came to mind." Danny frowned, concerned. "And now people are going to want to know more about this Enrique. How are you going to keep this up?" Before Emma could reply, a colleague from another department appeared to return a document. He gave her a curious smile and said, "Hey, Emma, so is it true? You're dating someone famous?" She froze. Danny tried to play it off with a laugh, but Emma's discomfort was evident. She quickly deflected, saying she preferred to keep her personal life private. The colleague walked away, still smiling, clearly savoring the fresh gossip. It was official. The lie was spreading rapidly through the office. Amid the mounting whispers, Emma tried to focus on her tasks, but the atmosphere had shifted. Several people made subtle comments or dropped sly jokes about her relationship with Enrique Iglesias. It was so surreal that she struggled not to lose her composure. At times, she felt like screaming the truth. At others, she considered locking herself in the restroom to cry. To make matters worse, Nathan seemed to oscillate between indifference and a peculiar kind of attention toward Emma. At one moment, he'd rush past her as if she didn't exist. In the next, he'd make a point to ask her seemingly trivial questions, as if testing her responses. Once, during breakfast in the cafeteria, he sat a few tables away without saying a word, but Emma could feel his gaze on her from time to time. The tension was almost unbearable. One afternoon, as Emma was finishing a report, she noticed an unusual stir in Nathan's office. People whispered about a heated phone call he'd received, speculating it might be his ex-fiancée or a personal issue. Hearing mentions of Nathan's former fiancée made Emma's chest tighten. He had already suffered betrayal, and now he seemed to distrust everyone. Perhaps his confusion about Emma was compounded by the half-truths she was telling him. The climax of her discomfort came during a break when Nathan brought up your boyfriend's concert. Emma didn't know how to respond. He remarked that he'd seen something on TV about Enrique Iglesias and imagined Emma attending all his performances. The comment was clearly a jab, but his tone wasn't harsh. It felt more like a way to mask his own pain, hinting that he didn't believe a word of it but wasn't ready to call her out. Emma could only muster a weak smile, confirming, "Sometimes I do watch his shows." At the end of another exhausting day, Emma locked her notebook in the drawer before leaving. She glanced around the now empty office, feeling a pang of sadness. Why was everything so complicated? Why couldn't Nathan just have an open conversation about his feelings? And why had she trapped herself in such a ridiculous lie? These unanswered questions haunted her as she exited the building. As she packed her bag, her phone lit up with a new message. With her heart racing, she unlocked the screen. It was from Nathan. "We need to discuss the future of your position. Urgent." A chill ran down her spine, fearing that the chaos she had created was about to come crashing down. Emma arrived at the office earlier than usual, barely able to sleep the previous night. Nathan's message, "We need to discuss the future of your position. Urgent." Repeated endlessly in her mind, and every possibility she imagined only heightened her anxiety. Was it a disguised termination, a severe warning, or, at best, a change in responsibilities? She headed up to the executive floor and tried to locate Nathan, but the secretary informed her he wouldn't be available until later. Deciding to wait, Emma settled at her desk, unable to fully focus on routine tasks. As she sifted through emails, she noticed curious glances from her colleagues. Rumors about her supposed relationship with Enrique Iglesias were running rampant, and Nathan's cryptic message about her future only fueled the speculations. Everyone seemed to have a theory, and Emma felt increasingly suffocated. A few minutes before 9, she spotted Nathan hurrying down the corridor. Without overthinking, she got up and followed him, catching him as he paused to speak with a staff member near the break room. Emma called his name softly but firmly. He finished his conversation and turned toward her. "Can you meet with me now?" she asked, trying to sound calm despite her racing heart. Nathan nodded but said nothing. They walked together to the small meeting room adjacent to his office. Once inside, he closed the door and gestured for Emma to sit. The air was heavy. From his expression, Emma sensed that whatever was troubling her wasn't the only thing weighing on him. There seemed to be other conflicts smoldering behind his dark eyes. "So," Nathan began, sitting across from her, "I'll be direct. I've been reflecting on your past performance and where it stands now." "I know I've fallen short," Emma admitted, staring at her hands on the table. "But I'm trying my best." He gave a slight nod, offering no trace of sympathy. "I'm not questioning your effort, but we can't pretend everything's fine. We've received complaints from some partner departments, and I need to maintain the company's standard of excellence." "I understand." Emma felt a lump forming in her throat. "You mentioned having a famous boyfriend. I know it's not my business, but it's curious how that surfaced so suddenly. Is it disrupting your routine?" Emma blinked, startled. She hadn't expected him to bring that up so directly. How could she explain without contradicting herself that the whole romance was a poorly concocted lie? Actually, things have been complicated. But I don't think it's because of Enrique," she lied, silently praying not to blush. Nathan scrutinized her for a moment, seemingly ready to press further but deciding against it. Instead, he stood, signaling the meeting was over. Emma rose as well, feeling as though something important had been left unsaid. She didn't expect that, within minutes, everything would come to a head. As she left the meeting room, her phone rang with an urgent call from another department. She answered quickly, sorting out the issue, while Nathan started walking down the corridor. Following behind him, still on the call, she noticed staff members lingering nearby, including Danny, who was exchanging worried whispers with a colleague. Suddenly, Nathan turned to her, his expression sterner than ever. "Emma, while you're here, I need you to review another report for me by tomorrow morning. No excuses." His tone was sharp and authoritative, drawing attention from passers-by. Emma felt the pressure mounting but didn't want to take the reprimand silently in front of everyone. She attempted a defense. "Nathan, I can do it, but I just received a huge list of pending tasks. Wouldn't it make more sense to assign the report to someone with more availability? I could organize a team." "No," he interrupted firmly. "You'll handle it. I trust your ability, but you've been distracted lately. Consider this your chance to make up for it." Their exchange grew tense, almost confrontational. The employees around them pretended to shuffle papers or check their phones but were clearly eavesdropping. Emma felt anger and embarrassment rising. Why did he have to demand this so publicly? And why did it feel so personal? "Fine, I'll do the report," she replied, her voice louder than intended. "But I'm not the only one with issues, Nathan." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, silence filled the corridor. It felt as though Emma had crossed a line. The staff froze, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. "If you have something to say," Nathan replied, his tone icy, "I suggest you say it in private. Or are you looking for attention?" The jab stung Emma deeply. She was ready to respond when Danny stepped forward, standing beside her with a pleading expression that said, "Please stop." Faced with the impasse, Emma swallowed her retort. She lowered her gaze and walked back to her desk, her face burning with humiliation. She felt both humiliated and furious at how he had exposed her in front of everyone. The tension lingered throughout the day. Emma worked diligently but felt the weight of judgmental glances. Some colleagues whispered, and the gossip about her celebrity boyfriend continued unabated. By late afternoon, news of the company's Christmas party spread. Posters in the halls, email invitations, and general excitement. For many, it was an anticipated event. For Emma, it was just another opportunity for tensions to erupt, as she'd be forced to interact with Nathan. "Are you bringing Enrique?" a colleague teased as they passed her desk. She gave a nervous smile, saying nothing. Inside, she wished she could disappear. The next day followed the same pattern. Intense work, chatter about the party, questions about her supposed love life, and fraught encounters with Nathan. Around lunchtime, he called her in for another meeting. Her nerves were already frayed, but she took a deep breath and entered his office. "I've completed the report. I can hand it over now," she said, holding up a flash drive. "Good. Leave it here." Nathan gestured to his desk. Then, studying her carefully, he added, "I have news that I think will surprise you." Emma felt a stab of apprehension. He motioned for her to come closer. Instead of speaking directly, Nathan retrieved a document from a folder and handed it to her. Stepping back, he seemed to watch her reactions closely. The first paragraph outlined an internal restructuring. Then came the section on promotions and transfers. Emma's name appeared prominently, assigning her as head of department at another branch in a distant city. Shock overwhelmed her. It was a promotion, yet it would uproot her professional life and take her far from Nathan. "I don't know what to say," Emma murmured, her vision blurred by the unexpected news. "It's what you deserve after all your time here," he said in a formal tone. "You're talented and capable. There, you'll lead your own team." She searched his face for any hint of genuine emotion, but it remained unreadable. A flood of conflicting feelings engulfed her. This should have been a moment of celebration, yet why did it feel like exile? "I need time to think," she whispered. "When would the transfer happen?" Nathan flipped through the document quickly. "Soon. HR contacted me today. It looks like everything will be finalized after the Christmas party." A heavy silence filled the room. Emma bit her lip, holding back tears. Any emotional reaction could be seen as weakness. She stepped back, took a deep breath, and thanked him for the opportunity in a polite tone. Inside, though, she screamed, "Is this his way of pushing me out of his life? Of dealing with a pain he can't express?" She left the office, clutching the document, avoiding everyone's gaze. Her head pounded. She needed to tell Danny, to figure out what was really happening. Stowing the paper in her bag, she spent the rest of the day in a daze, mechanically completing tasks. At the end of the day, as she packed up to leave, she noticed a small box on her desk, wrapped in festive holiday paper with no note or signature. Carefully, she opened it. Inside was an elegant hardcover notebook with her name engraved on the first page. It was the kind of thoughtful gift someone who knew her love for writing would give. Emma had no doubt it was from Nathan. He knew about the notebook where she scribbled reflections, though he had never supported the farcical boyfriend story. The gesture was silent but loaded with meaning, and perhaps a goodbye. Emma moved to the corridor window, gazing at the snowfall outside. A thin layer of white blanketed the street below. The cold she felt inside didn't dissipate despite her warm coat. Clutching the notebook to her chest, she tried to decipher the true message behind the gift. Was it a good luck for her new role, or a reminder that he no longer wanted her near? She held the present tightly, staring out at the snow, wondering if this promotion was Nathan's way of saying goodbye. Emma woke up with the weight of a restless night still pressing on her shoulders. Her room felt colder than usual, and it took her a few minutes to convince herself to leave the cocoon of blankets. When she glanced at her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Deep circles under her eyes, and a constant worry etched across her face. Today was the day she would face the official transfer papers. There was no turning back. At the office, she settled into the desk she had occupied for so long, resting her elbows amidst stacks of documents. The phone rang sporadically, but Emma could only focus on the envelope from HR that lay ominously near her computer. She opened it slowly, reading each line with a bitter resignation. The date and details of her new position jumped out at her. Everything was there in black and white. As she processed the contents, Nathan's voice echoed down the hallway. He seemed to be giving instructions to his secretary in a perfectly professional tone, devoid of hesitation. It was as if he had erased her from any personal consideration. A pang of pain gripped Emma's chest. His firm and deliberate words dealt with deadlines and budgets, but he made no mention of her or her imminent transfer. His coldness stung in a way that felt almost physical. It wasn't long before the official HR email popped up on her screen, confirming all her fears. It was a reminder that her departure wasn't a rumor or a distant plan. It was a reality. Emma realized she wouldn't be able to focus on any tasks without at least attempting to speak to Nathan. She needed to understand why things had reached this point. Was it really a promotion, or just a way to push her away? Gathering her courage, she stood up. Walking down the corridor, she took deep breaths with every step, feeling a lump form in her throat. When she approached his office, she saw the secretary gathering a few files. Barely managing to speak, Emma asked if she could enter. The secretary, in her usual curt manner, informed her that Nathan had just left for an external meeting. Emma had no choice but to nod, her disappointment evident, knowing he wouldn't be back anytime soon. Frustrated, she returned to her desk, trying to organize her drawers. At the very least, she wanted to leave everything ready for whoever would take her place. In the process, she stumbled upon a small cream-colored envelope tucked away in a forgotten corner. She immediately recognized the handwriting. It was her own. More importantly, she noticed the recipient, Nathan. Memories of a time when she had written a letter confessing her admiration for him flooded back. In a moment of romantic bravery and optimism, she had drafted the note but never had the courage to deliver it. Her fingers traced the paper, recalling how she had once dreamed of Nathan reciprocating her feelings. Back then, everything seemed simpler. He wasn't yet haunted by the ghosts of a cancelled wedding, and she hadn't entangled herself in the lie about Enrique Iglesias. She remembered writing about his talent, his dedication to leading the company, and the spark of humanity that always shone in his eyes. Emma couldn't stop her heart from aching, realizing how deeply she still loved him, despite how impossible it all seemed now. As she sat lost in thought, Danny appeared, her usual concern written across her face. "Emma, I've heard some rumors about Nathan. They say he's become even more withdrawn, afraid of getting hurt again. Apparently his ex-fiancée might have reached out, or something like that." Emma felt a chill in her stomach. "Really? Where did you hear that?" "Some people in finance mentioned it. They think he hasn't moved on from the pain of being left. The more he feels vulnerable, the more he shuts himself off." Danny sighed and rested a hand on Emma's shoulder. "And now you're leaving. Do you think he'll be able to handle all of this?" Emma shook her head, conflicted. Knowing about Nathan's vulnerability made her question whether she was right to stay silent. But the weight of the Enrique Iglesias lie hung heavily over her. Any wrong move could blow everything up, hurting him and exposing her own weaknesses. The workday dragged on. By the end of the day, Emma found herself alone in the corridors, long past closing time. She had a few documents left to sign and felt the urge to mentally say goodbye to the place. She wandered through each department, remembering various moments, laughing with colleagues, arriving early just to catch a glimpse of Nathan walking in, the coffee he brought her one morning when she looked particularly tired. It all felt like another life. In the break room, a small object on the counter caught her eye, a white mug with the initials NB delicately engraved. She was reminded of the time Nathan had offered her coffee in that same mug during a chaotic afternoon, smiling as he told her she needed to recharge. At that moment, Emma had smiled shyly, feeling there was more to his gesture than mere professional kindness. Even that simple memory carried a weight that now felt lost. Ready to leave the office, she grabbed her coat and bag, turning off the lights in her workspace. As she did, she noticed a piece of paper on the desk, a handwritten note, unsigned. "Good luck at your new branch," it read. The short, direct message sent a shiver through her. The handwriting wasn't Danny's, nor did it seem like anyone else's she knew at the office. Instinctively, she suspected it was from Nathan, though he would likely deny it if asked. She slipped the note into her bag, unsure whether to interpret it as a friendly farewell or an empty formality. Walking down the corridor, her footsteps echoed. Up ahead, she saw Nathan speaking on the phone, his back turned to her. He gestured tensely, his tone, though distant, clearly laced with irritation. Emma hesitated, not wanting to intrude, but she caught fragments of his conversation suggesting personal troubles, perhaps something to do with his ex-fiancée. A mix of jealousy and compassion overwhelmed her. Jealousy, because it hurt to think Nathan had once been so committed to someone else. Compassion, because she could see how much he still suffered. She imagined what it would be like if he opened his heart to her, sharing his pain, and if she had been honest from the start. She wanted to approach him but feared crossing a line and worsening his struggles. As she contemplated, her shoe made a slight noise against the floor, and Nathan turned abruptly. Emma froze, startled. He held her gaze for a moment, shook his head in an unreadable way, and walked off, ending his call abruptly. She stood there, silent, as he disappeared, leaving an echo of slamming doors and unresolved tension in the air. Still reeling, Emma felt an overwhelming need to come clean about the lie she had maintained. She had been a coward for so long, but with her transfer looming and Nathan's evident vulnerability, everything seemed to demand that she tell him the truth. Yet, images of his potential reactions, anger, disappointment, rejection, flooded her mind. If he already distrusted people, how would he handle such a blatant lie? In the elevator, clutching her notebook to her chest, Emma took a deep breath, replaying every romantic phrase she had written that had sparked this turmoil. She wanted to tear up each page, to erase every confession. Yet she knew those words were proof of something real she felt for Nathan, beyond all the pretenses involving Enrique Iglesias. That genuine emotion still pulsed, relentless in her heart. When she reached the ground floor, the cold December wind greeted her. Christmas lights adorned the trees, store windows, and even the small coffee stand on the corner. The festive decorations, vibrant and shimmering, only seemed to amplify her melancholy. She walked to her car, thinking about how her departure date was approaching fast. In just days, she would be in another city, with a new team. Everything felt like an inevitable sentence, leaving no room to untangle the truths and lies of her heart. She had the sense that if she didn't act soon, she would lose Nathan forever, not just to physical distance but to the emotional walls he had built. The thought of leaving without closure gnawed at her, yet every step she took down this precarious path reminded her that Nathan abhorred lies. She hadn't just deceived him, she had spent months weaving a web of fiction, using a famous singer's name as a shield. Sighing, Emma got into her car. The Christmas lights blurred momentarily in her vision. She rested her head on the steering wheel, feeling tears threaten to fall but holding them back. She needed to stay composed. Everything was already set in stone. In a few days, she would be gone, and Nathan would stay, perhaps pretending not to care. Who knew if they would ever cross paths again, and under what circumstances? Back home, she opened her laptop to review some last-minute work tasks. She was focused until her phone buzzed on the desk, lighting up the dark room. A message stood out, sent from a familiar number. She read it, her heart racing. "We need to discuss the final report before you leave. Nathan." Emma clutched the phone to her chest, sensing there was more behind his request, something beyond spreadsheets and deadlines. It felt like the beginning of a conversation they had both been avoiding for far too long. Emma stared at the mirror for long minutes, examining her reflection in the dress she had chosen for the big event. It was a simple design, elegant enough for the occasion, but she didn't feel ready to smile and pretend everything was fine. The sparkle in her eyes was missing, the one she used to have in previous years when the holiday season brought joy and anticipation. Now, every detail reminded her that she was about to leave, and that this gathering would be the last under the same roof as Nathan. She sighed deeply, trying to convince herself she needed to attend. It was a traditional corporate event, where executives gave speeches, symbolic awards were handed out, and employees exchanged well wishes for the coming year. With her tenure at the company nearing its end, Emma wanted nothing more than to go unnoticed. Yet, paradoxically, she knew that wouldn't happen. After all, in just a few weeks, her transfer would be finalized, and many colleagues were already greeting her with a faint air of farewell. Getting into her car to head to the party, her heart clenched. She remembered how many times she had imagined attending this event with Nathan, both of them smiling in some corner, exchanging glances that could say far more than words. It was an absurd dream, but one that had kept her hopeful in the preceding weeks. Now, all that remained was a mutual coldness and the unsustainable lie about Enrique Iglesias. With each mile she drove, she tried to convince herself she'd do what was necessary to maintain her image and to avoid deepening the pain she carried. The venue was adorned in red and gold, with Christmas lights illuminating the walls and festive music filling the air. Employees and executives mingled in elegant attire, chatting in small groups. Emma felt the weight of the evening as she crossed the threshold, greeting colleagues who welcomed her with polite smiles. While people spoke about the spirit of togetherness and the magic of Christmas, she felt isolated in a corner of her heart. Her first sip of punch was more bitter than sweet, as all she could think about was the desire to leave, or better yet, vanish in an instant. But Emma knew she had to maintain her composure until the end. She tried to distract herself by chatting with one or two co-workers who approached her, exchanging pleasantries. Topics like, "You'll love the new branch," or "I heard there will be great opportunities there," came up repeatedly, and she responded with curt nods. For her, it was a constant reminder that she was leaving, even though she didn't truly want to go. Amid these brief interactions, raised voices caught her attention from one corner of the room, colleagues laughing and toasting animatedly, recounting a concert that had taken place in the city the previous week. Emma's stomach turned as she suspected someone might bring up the infamous Enrique Iglesias story she had fabricated. Sure enough, a co-worker jokingly shouted, "So, is Emma's superstar boyfriend going to show up and sing for us tonight?" The group erupted in laughter, and a few glanced her way with curious looks. Feeling her face flush, Emma pretended not to hear, though her mind screamed for an escape. The lie felt suffocating, floating in the air around her. She chose to move in the opposite direction, seeking refuge at the hors d'oeuvres table, where she picked up a napkin with a small appetizer she couldn't bring herself to eat. Her stomach was knotted with anxiety. Then, as if drawn by some invisible force, she saw him. Nathan stood in a dark suit, speaking with two executives. His impeccable posture was as familiar as ever, but there was something in his expression she couldn't quite decipher. Emma's gaze lingered for a moment, and then, subtly, he noticed her too. Their eyes met briefly, and she thought she saw the same restrained pain in his that she felt, a kind of unease that couldn't be masked by polite smiles. As more people approached to greet Nathan, Emma turned away and moved toward the windows, gazing at the outdoor decorations wrapped in Christmas lights. She tried to steady her breathing and regain her composure, but soon footsteps approached, and a voice behind her made her startle slightly. "I thought I'd find you surrounded by people, Emma. You've always been popular around here." Turning, she saw an old colleague from marketing. He smiled, commenting on how much they'd miss her at the company. He was sociable, someone she had exchanged light-hearted jokes with in the past, but now his presence made her uneasy, knowing any topic could lead to that infamous story about her boyfriend. Sure enough, the conversation veered in that direction. "So, no Enrique tonight? What a shame. Maybe he could have sung Hero and brought everyone to tears." He chuckled at his own joke. Emma, out of options, forced a tense laugh and looked away. Unfortunately, he's busy. You know, the tour life. Before the situation could worsen, the colleague was called away by someone else, leaving Emma to finally exhale in peace. But the discomfort only grew. She took another sip of punch, even though the taste had become nauseating. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Nathan glance her way briefly, as if measuring her actions. She desperately wished she could run to him and confess everything, but fear of his reaction kept her rooted in place. The night proceeded with formal speeches from a stage set up in the ballroom. The operations director was the first to take the microphone, expressing gratitude and celebrating the company's achievements. Then Nathan was called to speak. The room erupted into respectful applause. He ascended the stage, poised and calm, though Emma noticed a hint of bitterness in his every gesture. Her heart raced, certain his words would somehow touch on her, whether directly or in the silences between them. Nathan thanked the team for their hard work, highlighted the company's growth, and at the end, mentioned Emma's transfer as a recognition of her outstanding contributions. She froze as applause and glances came from all directions. Each congratulatory word felt like a knife to her heart, as none of it felt like a true victory to her. And yet, she had no choice but to smile, a mixture of embarrassment and formality. After finishing his speech, Nathan stepped down from the stage and discreetly positioned himself in a more secluded area of the room, chatting with a few veteran directors. Emma seized the opportunity to stay distant, knowing any interaction would lead to a confrontation she wasn't prepared to face. Yet she couldn't help but notice at one point that Nathan watched her, as if silently inviting her to approach. She remained still, paralyzed by the storm of emotions within her. During a break between speeches and toasts, Emma wandered to the venue's outdoor area, which led to a garden illuminated by strings of lights forming a glowing tunnel. Several employees were scattered about, enjoying the fresh air. She leaned against a column, contemplating how to explain herself if she finally decided to reveal the truth about Enrique. She was terrified of exposing her feelings publicly, especially with the rumors that Nathan might lose his composure if he felt betrayed. When she re-entered the ballroom, a director approached, smiling and commenting that Emma should have a grand farewell to match her promotion. She forced a smile, agreeing, though the weight of every word crushed her. He joked about wanting to see the famous boyfriend's reaction when she moved to another city, and Emma nearly choked as she replied. It was all too much. Her eyes drifted to Nathan, standing further back, alone, holding a drink, deliberately keeping to himself. Involuntarily, their gazes locked again. Emma felt certain he took a step toward her, but someone called him over, and he retreated. Instead, he greeted another group. Her mind raced. If they had a moment alone, would he say something important? Could she muster the courage to admit she couldn't bear the lie anymore? That she had pretended to have someone to protect herself from being hurt and from hurting him? Time passed in a whirlwind. Before she knew it, the evening had grown late, and some guests were beginning to leave. Emma felt exhaustion wash over her. The tension had kept her on edge the entire night. She decided it was better to leave before anything painful unfolded. Grabbing her bag, she bid farewell to a few colleagues and headed toward the entrance. But as she neared the door, she overheard murmurs from a group of employees speaking excitedly nearby. She paused unintentionally, catching one of them saying, "I heard Nathan's planning to leave right after Christmas, maybe even go abroad with no return date." Another voice confirmed, mentioning something about an indefinite leave, suggesting he was taking an extended break to get away from everything. Emma's legs trembled. A hurricane of emotions swept over her. If she was leaving for another branch and Nathan was disappearing overseas, the possibility of never seeing him again felt terrifyingly real. Emma realized she might be about to lose him forever. Emma spent the remainder of the Christmas event in a state of torpor, unable to stop thinking about the rumor that Nathan might leave the country, far away from everything and everyone. The thought of losing all contact with him hurt more than she imagined she could bear. She left early that evening but barely managed to sleep when she got home. She spent the night tossing and turning, rehearsing 1,000 times what she would say if she ever had the chance to speak to him again. Deep down, she was determined to tell the truth about the lie she had created, even if it was too late. The next morning, she arrived at the office feeling heavier than ever. The sleepless night had taken its toll, dark circles under her eyes and a tension in her face that she couldn't hide. The transfer seemed inevitable, and the possibility of Nathan disappearing from her life made everything feel even more desperate. She took off her coat and went straight to her desk, attempting to organize the accumulated paperwork. She needed to at least fulfill her final obligations before leaving the company. The phone rang shortly after, interrupting her brief moment of focus. It was Danny, asking if everything was okay. Emma took a deep breath and replied that she was handling things as best as she could. Her friend mentioned hearing a rumor that Nathan had argued with his ex-fiancée over the phone the night before, leaving him upset again. Emma felt a pang in her chest upon hearing this. It was becoming increasingly clear that he was surrounded by unhealed wounds, and she wasn't helping at all, caught in a senseless lie. She tried to get back to her tasks, but her focus slipped with every beat of her heart. Then, an email from Nathan appeared, terse and direct, requesting her presence in his office in a few minutes to discuss pending matters before her transfer. That brief and formal message gave Emma the push she needed to decide. She would tell him everything, no matter the cost. It was better to face the frustration once and for all than to keep dragging this story on. Standing in front of his office's glass door, her heart raced. She knocked twice, and his secretary gestured for her to enter. Inside, the atmosphere felt colder than even the air conditioning suggested. Nathan sat behind his desk, going through some documents. When he looked up, his gaze narrowed, and the silence between them grew tense. She took a deep breath and began to speak, trying to organize her thoughts. "I need to say something before everything is finalized." He leaned slightly forward. "Go ahead." Emma noticed the weariness in his eyes, as though he lacked the strength to face more problems. That made her briefly question whether it was worth stirring up this wound. But she had already decided she wouldn't leave without speaking. "About my boyfriend," she said, her voice faltering. "I need to clarify that, actually." Nathan interrupted her, leaning his arms on the desk. "Emma, I don't want to be rude, but I have more urgent matters to deal with. You know your performance has dropped significantly in recent times, and now you say you have something to clarify?" "It's important," she whispered, trying to steady herself. "This Enrique, he doesn't exist. I made up the story out of fear." Nathan remained silent, but his expression made it clear he felt betrayed. Emma watched him swallow hard, as though searching for an appropriate reaction. The air seemed to grow thinner, and she realized her worst fear was materializing. He now saw her as a liar who toyed with his emotions. "You made it up?" he repeated, his voice low, almost inaudible. "And why?" She stepped closer to his desk, wringing her hands. "I felt like I needed to justify the closeness I had with you. I didn't want to seem involved. And I didn't want you to see the notes in my notebook and think they were about you. So, in a moment of panic, I said the first name that came to mind." Nathan let out a brief laugh, but it wasn't humorous. It was incredulous. "So tell me, does everyone know about this now? Is it a joke around the office? And you kept up the facade? Why?" Emma wiped the corner of her eyes, already glistening with tears. She knew nothing she said would justify the mess she had created. "I was completely scared. I saw that you were still hurting from your ex-fiancé, from the betrayal. I was afraid of making things worse for you, of hurting you even more." He stood from his chair, placing his hands on the desk. He looked furious, but there was also a layer of sadness, perhaps disappointment. "You toyed with my emotions, Emma? You wanted to protect me by lying, by giving false hopes?" She stepped back, feeling tears threaten to spill. "It wasn't like that. I just didn't want you to know how I felt. I was afraid of being rejected, and then everything spiraled out of control." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly disturbed, as though he didn't know where to direct his anger or pain. "You felt something? Did you really? How am I supposed to believe that now? All you've shown me is inconsistency and insecurity." Emma felt his words cut deep, but she knew she had to endure it. "I understand it's hard to believe, but I swear I didn't mean any harm." Nathan grabbed a random paper from his desk and tossed it aside, a gesture of impatience. "God, Emma, I've had my share of painful surprises. You know what happened in my past, and now this. You made me think you were involved with someone else, confusing me while I—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Emma felt the unspoken words weighing like a block of concrete. It seemed that, in some way, he had cared for her, but her lie had created an insurmountable chasm. She wanted to approach him, to touch him, to apologize, but didn't know if she'd be allowed. "I'm sorry." Her voice broke. "I thought I was doing the best to protect us." He shook his head, a mix of anger and resignation. "Protect us from what? From an honest conversation? From owning up to something if there was anything real? Emma, what you did was the opposite. You only made things more confusing and left me feeling like I can't trust you." She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. A shiver ran through her body as she realized he was right. Perhaps she had been so trapped in her own fear that she had created a barrier even greater than the disillusionment of a groom abandoned at the altar. She felt overwhelmingly guilty for not having had the courage to act differently. "I don't expect your forgiveness," she murmured, staring at the floor. "I just wanted you to know the truth before I leave for the other branch." Nathan took a deep breath, walking to the window to look outside. Seconds passed, like entire minutes. Then, without turning around, he said, "Maybe that's for the best. Honestly, I don't think I can handle another disappointment in my life." Those words felt like a final blow. Emma stepped closer but stopped, feeling an invisible barrier he seemed to have erected around himself. She thought about asking if there was any chance, if he could understand, but realized now was not the time. He was tired, hurt, and she had no magical words to fix everything. As tears welled up in her eyes, she gathered what little dignity she had left. "I'm sorry, Nathan. I have nothing more to say." He made a vague gesture as if to say, "Go," or "enough," without turning to face her. Emma then understood there was no room for further discussion. She left with her head down, holding back tears until the door closed. She crossed the half-empty hallway, her breathing faltering with every step. Colleagues passed by, but she couldn't see anyone clearly. It felt like she was walking through a blurred landscape, swallowed by the pain of having destroyed the trust of someone she loved so deeply. Deep down, she knew that by staying silent for so long, by inventing meaningless stories, she had fed the very thing she feared most, an irreparable separation. Nathan's hurt and disappointed face, along with his harsh words, echoed in her mind. She descended in the elevator, barely aware of the movement, feeling the world spin around her. When she reached the lobby, she passed through the glass doors to the outside. The icy December wind hit her face, making her shiver. Heavy clouds covered the sky, and the pale afternoon light seemed to amplify the sadness consuming her inside. Without direction, Emma took a few steps along the sidewalk. Only later did she realize she had forgotten her gloves in the office, but she didn't have the courage to go back. She let the wind lash her hands, feeling an uncontrollable urge to cry. She fought back the tears, not wanting people to see her face disfigured by grief, but everything inside her screamed in despair. Emma left the office that freezing December afternoon, fighting back tears, with the certainty that she had lost Nathan for good. Emma woke up with the sensation that she had spent the entire night trying to escape a nightmare that followed her everywhere. Her eyes stung, her head felt heavy, and a despair so deep weighed on her that she could barely move. She lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, as if trying to summon the courage to start yet another day that promised to be painful. When she finally got up, the half-open suitcase in the corner of the room seemed to mock her, a stark reminder that the transfer was real and inevitable. She began packing her work clothes, folding each piece with a reverence so slow it bordered on ritual. With every garment she packed, a memory resurfaced. The blouse she wore to her first meeting where she spoke directly to Nathan, the skirt she had on when he complimented her for the first time, the coat she used on countless early mornings, arriving at the office just to catch a glimpse of him before everyone else. Each item symbolized everything she had lived through there, both professionally and emotionally. She also packed some folders and documents into a thick binder, as the new branch had requested reports that she would prepare upon arrival. It felt like she was packing not just papers, but fragments of dreams, hopes that had shattered over the past few months. When she finished organizing what she could, a restlessness gripped her chest. She needed to go out, breathe some cold air, and somehow face the chaos she had left in her relationship with Nathan, even if he was ignoring or keeping his distance from her. Before leaving the house, she noticed a crumpled envelope on the bed. It was the old letter she had written to Nathan, secretly confessing her admiration and gratitude for everything he had inspired her to be. At the time, she had considered delivering it anonymously, but never mustered the courage. Now, reading those naive and hopeful lines made her realize how much she had changed. It was as though she were a deadened version of herself, so torn apart by recent events. She tucked the letter into her bag, unsure why. Maybe it was just a reminder that she hadn't always been so insecure. She arrived at the office by taxi, as a light rain was falling, and the temperature had dropped even more than in previous days. As she walked through the lobby, her footsteps echoed against the marble floor. With each echo, a thought arose. Are you really giving up? Won't you try again? Has Nathan already gone forever? She ran into Danny just before reaching her desk. Her friend wore a sympathetic expression and gave her a light hug without saying a word. Emma wanted to cry but held back. She didn't want to play out her emotional storm in the office hallway. Is everything sorted for your move? Danny asked tentatively as she released her from the hug. Pretty much, Emma replied, more to end the conversation than to give details. And him? Do you know if he's around? Danny shook her head, her face full of concern. I heard he came in early today but locked himself in his office, reviewing papers and making calls. A lot of people are saying he plans to take an extended leave once this restructuring process is over. Emma's stomach turned. The conversation she had had with Nathan had been curt, full of bitterness. It didn't surprise her that he wanted to disappear, nor that he avoided seeing her. Even so, the idea of leaving without a truce seemed unbearable. She thanked Danny, saying she would try to finish up some tasks and, if luck was on her side, talk to Nathan before the day was over. She crossed the corridor to her cubicle, where cardboard boxes were already piling up. She grabbed one she had left mostly empty to pack her personal belongings, photos with colleagues, small mementos collected over the years, and the infamous notebook where she had scribbled countless forbidden confessions about Nathan. As she placed everything inside, memories came rushing back. Every note contained a singular moment, the day he praised her report, the time he invited her for a quick coffee and asked about her life. Now, that notebook felt like the symbol of a personal tragedy. When she finished packing the box, she felt the urge to pass by his office, even if just to sense the air of the place that had both enchanted and frustrated her in equal measure. She decided to try. She walked down the corridor, and the secretary looked at her in surprise. Emma asked if she could see him, but the answer was the same as always. He's on a call and cannot be disturbed. She thanked her and walked back, the rejection hitting her like another punch to the stomach. By mid-afternoon, she had completed some reports, though her mind was spinning. She dared to check the internal schedule to see if Nathan's name appeared in any meetings, hoping to find a chance to approach him. Nothing concrete came up. It seemed he was avoiding contact not only with her, but with many people. For a moment she considered sending him a message, but feared he would ignore it or reply harshly, as he had during their last exchange. When the clock signaled the end of the workday, Emma could no longer bear being there, surrounded by curious glances. Many knew this was one of her final days at the office. She packed up her things, grabbed her keys, and left without formally saying goodbye to most. In the taxi on her way home, she stared out the window, watching the Christmas lights still glowing in the streets, a glaring contrast to the emptiness she felt inside. She recalled the harsh words she and Nathan had exchanged and how she had failed to reveal her true feelings. Upon arriving home, she went straight to her room and saw the suitcase again, still open. She resumed packing, putting in shoes, winter clothes, and a few sentimental items. With each piece that went into the suitcase, a wave of melancholy hit her. She felt that by closing it, she would take the final step away from a story that had marked her so deeply. However, when she picked up the crumpled letter expressing her love for Nathan, she paused. She seriously considered tearing it up, but something inside her told her it wasn't right to erase it. The paper represented her genuine feelings, even though they were entwined with mistakes and lies. She tucked it into her coat pocket, as if it were a token of courage. Perhaps there was still a chance, however slim, to deliver those words to him, or at least to say what was in them. She sighed, zipping up the suitcase. The sense of loss and farewell became palpable. The memories of her time with Nathan, the times they almost confessed their feelings, the shared glances that turned from warm to cold, everything swirled together, leaving her dazed. She ran her hands through her hair and rubbed her face, trying to shake off the exhaustion. She needed to make a definitive decision. Either she would find a way to talk to him, or she would accept that it was over, with no turning back. The temperature outside had plummeted, but Emma felt that the cold within her was even greater. She looked out the window, seeing the street bathed in the glow of a yellow street lamp and a few Christmas decorations swaying in the wind. She remembered Nathan's face, that profound silence he maintained when reflecting on the painful past of his broken marriage, and how he had withdrawn even more after she revealed the lie about Enrique Iglesias. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, she took a deep breath and decided she couldn't end things like this, not without at least trying. She picked up her phone and saw there were no new messages from Nathan, no notifications from him. Even so, she forced herself to believe that if she insisted a little more, she might find a way to say what should have been said long ago. First, she needed to leave the house, breathe some fresh air, and think. She looked at herself in the mirror, adjusted her coat, and confirmed that the letter was still safe in her pocket. She felt shaky but certain that she couldn't keep living with the weight of her lies, her hidden feelings, and, most of all, her failure to fully apologize. She closed the suitcase, grabbed her coat, and stepped out the door, whispering, "Either he forgives me now, or I'll never see him again." Emma dashed into the icy street, feeling the wind cut against her face. The snowflakes fell softly yet persistently, piling up on rooftops and window ledges. Her heart was in turmoil. She had spent so much time running from the truth, feeding a facade, that she never imagined reaching this point. Fear blended with determination to finally speak her heart, no matter the cost. She pulled out her phone and, trembling, dialed Danny's number. She needed some form of support, even if it was just a friend's voice to confirm she wasn't crazy for trying to fix things now. The call rang longer than usual, but when Danny's voice came through, Emma made an urgent plea. "I need to know where he is. I can't leave without at least trying to talk to him again." Danny hesitated on the other end. Emma could almost see her friend biting her lip, concerned, before responding. "I've heard rumors Nathan is still at the office, but honestly, I don't know if he'll see you. He's been avoiding everyone, even the directors." "I know," Emma replied, her breath fogging in the cold air, anxiety gripping her chest. "But I have to try. Thank you, Danny. She ended the call without further delay. Though it was still early in the evening, the office was likely almost empty since most staff left early during this festive season. Even so, she hailed a cab and headed straight to the building. As the car moved through the streets, Emma kept her gaze glued to the window, watching the colorful holiday lights blur past. Each block felt like a test of her courage. She had made her choice. Either she faced this, or she lost Nathan forever. When she arrived, she stepped out of the cab and walked to the building entrance. The doorman greeted her with a hint of surprise. He was used to seeing her in the mornings or late afternoons, not this late at night. She stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the executive floor. With each passing level, her heartbeat quickened. Finally, the elevator doors slid open. The corridor was nearly dark, illuminated only by faint emergency lighting and the muted glow of the night outside. Emma noticed the secretary's desk was predictably empty at this hour. Overcome with nerves, she walked straight to Nathan's office door and knocked twice, her legs trembling. Silence. She knocked again, with no response. Then, summoning her courage, she turned the doorknob and, to her surprise, found it unlocked. Inside, the office was partially dark, lit only by dim overhead lighting and the urban glow seeping through the windows. Nathan stood near the glass wall overlooking the city, his back to her, holding something in his hands. "I'm sorry for barging in," she said hesitantly, her voice barely steady, "but I can't leave without talking to you." Nathan stirred slightly but didn't fully turn around. Emma moved closer, the tension in the air almost tangible. She stopped a few steps from him, noticing he held a photograph in his hand, perhaps a picture from his past, something connected to the fiancé who had abandoned him. The thought made her heart ache. "Emma," he murmured, still not meeting her gaze. "You just don't give up, do you? I thought everything between us was settled." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry for being a coward. But all I'm asking is that before you send me away, you let me say what I need to." At last, Nathan turned his head slightly toward her. His face was a mixture of pain, irritation, and something else she couldn't quite decipher. Hope, maybe. She didn't know. She had to take the risk. "The lie about Enrique," she began, her voice shaking, "was nothing but fear. You went through something awful. You were left at the altar, and I saw how it shattered you. I didn't want to get close and make things worse for you, but at the same time I couldn't ignore how I felt about you. So I came up with this stupid idea to fake having a boyfriend, thinking it would protect both of us." He lowered the photo in his hand, revealing his face more clearly. Emma saw exhaustion etched into his features, the look of someone who had fought too many internal battles. His silence was heavy. "And what is it that you feel, exactly?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. She took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage. "I feel that. I love you, and I couldn't bear to leave without at least telling you that. I know I handled everything wrong, but please don't think it was a game. I tried to fix it all the wrong ways." Nathan stepped back as if to distance himself from the intensity of the moment. His face remained conflicted, etched with both anguish and yearning. "Emma, I'm scared too," he admitted, his tone softer now. "I've spent sleepless nights wondering if I could allow myself to feel something for you. After being abandoned so cruelly, discovering your lie about this boyfriend felt like proof that I can't trust anyone." Her tears began to fall. "I understand, but I didn't abandon you, and I don't want to now." "Then why create this charade?" "Because I'm insecure and didn't want you to see how much I cared. I thought I was protecting us, or myself. It was stupid, but it's the truth." Nathan closed his eyes briefly, exhaling deeply. A pause stretched between them, thick with unspoken emotions, each waiting for the other to break it. Finally, he placed the photo on a nearby table and took a few tentative steps closer. Emma's heart pounded in her ears. "And now you think just saying I love you fixes everything?" he asked, not harshly but with honesty. "It should, but the truth is, My mind is still a mess. Part of me wants to hold you and forget everything. Another part resents the betrayal of trust. Emma nodded, letting the tears flow freely. I know I ruined everything, but if there's even a small chance to rebuild that trust, I'm willing to try. I'll transfer to another branch if that's what it takes. I'll respect your space. Just give me a chance to prove I can be honest and someone you can rely on. Nathan's gaze held hers, speaking volumes, a blend of hurt, exhaustion, suppressed desire, hope, and fear. He opened his mouth to respond, but a distant noise from the hallway, the sound of a janitor's cart, broke the moment. The intimacy shattered. Emma instinctively stepped back, unsure if this signaled the end or left room for another step forward. What about your ex-fiancée? Emma blurted out impulsively. They said you argued with her on the phone. She's trying to reconnect, but there's nothing left for us, he replied, his eyes distant as he glanced out the window. I thought about traveling far away, starting over, but I don't know if that would solve anything or just be another escape. They stood facing each other, each yearning for the other to take the final step. Emma wanted to embrace him but hesitated, fearing he might pull away. He too seemed torn, part of him yearning for connection, the other wary of more pain. I'm ready to leave, he finally confessed, even if it's just for a while, and you're leaving in your own way too. I know, she whispered, wiping her tears carefully. But we can still talk. I even wrote something for you to read a while ago. She fumbled in her coat pocket, feeling the crumpled note. I just don't know if you'd want to hear it now. Nathan glanced at the paper she held. His lips quivered in a faint, sad smile. I don't know if I'm ready for more emotions, but if it helps you, go ahead. Emma unfolded the note with trembling hands and began reading aloud, her voice wavering but steady enough to convey the depth of her feelings. She spoke of how much she admired Nathan's strength, his professionalism, and his ability to inspire those around him. She confessed how safe she felt in his presence, despite never showing it. Each word felt like a step toward vulnerability. Nathan listened intently, as though absorbing every syllable. When she finished, Emma looked up. Is it too late to be honest? For a moment, Nathan said nothing, processing her words. Then, he rested a hand on her shoulder, not pushing her away but not pulling her closer either. It was a gesture laden with meaning. I don't have all the answers, he said softly, but thank you for reading that. It means maybe it's not too late, even though I still feel lost. Emma's heart swelled with hope. We can be lost together, if you'll give me a real chance to prove I'm on your side. He didn't confirm or deny, simply holding her gaze. The look they shared said more than any verbal promise. Yet the weight of the past couldn't be undone in an instant. Emma understood that all she had now was a fragile beginning or, at best, a temporary truce. A noise from the lobby snapped them out of their trance. Security guards discussed locking up for the night, their voices echoing down the corridor. Nathan released her shoulder, offering a faint, almost imperceptible smile. I think we should continue this conversation somewhere else, he suggested, gesturing toward the stairs. But maybe not tonight. I need time to sort through everything. Is that okay? Emma nodded, realizing this wasn't the end but a step forward. He glanced around, searching for the right words to part, then motioned for her to leave first. With a small pang in her chest, Emma walked past him, heading upstairs toward another exit. Behind her, Nathan lingered in the hallway for a moment before following his own path. As Emma walked away, she repeated to herself that, though they hadn't resolved everything, there was now a spark of hope. It would take more time, more courage, and more truth, but it was more than she'd had before meeting Nathan that night. Standing alone by the window, Emma watched the snow fall, feeling colder and emptier than the winter outside. She whispered to herself, I can't leave it like this. Emma woke up determined not to leave the story unfinished or wrapped in half-truths. The snow still covered the sidewalks, Christmas lights blinked on every corner, but none of it seemed to carry the season's usual glow of hope. For her, it was just another cold morning, heavy with a dense emotion that refused to dissipate. She needed to take a bold step, and this time, she wouldn't hesitate. She spent the early hours of the day finalizing preparations for her trip. She packed a small carry-on bag, carefully selecting only the essentials for her first weeks at the new branch. Her nearly empty apartment mirrored the state of her soul, recently devoid of dreams, entirely consumed by a whirlwind of uncertainties. Glancing at the clock, she realized it was time to say a final goodbye to the place she had called home for so long. Before leaving, she received a phone call from her family, wishing her good luck on this new professional chapter. Her mother asked if everything was okay, and Emma, trying to mask her emotions, murmured that everything was under control. She hung up feeling like a liar, but she kept that guilt to herself. She had to stay strong for what lay ahead. On her way to the office, this time only to hand over her keys and sign a few final documents, one thought lingered. I can't leave without seeing him again. The memory of their interrupted conversation in the hallway stayed vivid when Nathan admitted he was still confused and hurt. She remembered how close they'd come to resolving things, how his reaction to the note she'd written had stirred something in him, but nothing had been decided. The office was in holiday mode. Half the staff was on leave or working from home. Only the essential personnel remained. Emma walked into the lobby, her heart racing. The receptionist recognized her and, in a solemn tone, directed her to a side room where someone from HR was waiting for her to complete the paperwork. The bureaucratic process was quick. The HR representative, a man with a neutral expression, simply reviewed the details, requested 3 signatures, and wished her good luck. He handed Emma a brown envelope containing some forms to bring to the new branch. With that, she was officially detached from this office, though her managerial position awaited her in another city. For a moment she considered just walking away, but her heart wouldn't let her. She had to see Nathan. It didn't feel right to leave without offering him a chance to at least find closure, or perhaps a new beginning. If she was leaving that night, this was her only opportunity. She walked through the nearly deserted hallways, heading toward his office. The dimmed lights left the space bathed in soft shadows, elongating shapes on the floor. Every door she passed triggered memories. Quick laughs with colleagues, fleeting moments with Nathan, encouraging smiles he had given her when they were just boss and subordinate, not two souls tormented by conflicting emotions. As she approached Nathan's office, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. Was he still there? Her anxiety mounted as she cautiously stepped closer, hearing faint movements inside. She gently knocked with her knuckles. No response. Hesitant, she pushed the door open slightly. He was there, standing by the desk, sorting through some papers. He looked troubled. When he saw her, he froze, letting the papers fall from his hands. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Their eyes met, filled with countless unspoken words. "Still here?" Nathan asked, his tone a mix of surprise and a touch of defensiveness. "I came to sign some final documents," Emma said, stepping in hesitantly. "Then, my trip is tonight." Nathan nodded, walking over to the window. His hands were in his pockets, his expression tense. Outside, the sky was overcast and the snow began to fall again. The scene mirrored his mood. "So it's final? You're leaving tonight?" he asked without looking at her directly. "That's the plan," Emma replied, taking a deep breath. "But I couldn't leave without talking to you." Nathan turned to face her, his vulnerability clearer than she'd ever seen. "I didn't want you to leave like this either, but I didn't know how to reach out." Emma saw a glimmer of hope. She stepped closer, standing just a few feet from him. "That night, when we talked, you said you needed time to sort out your thoughts. I understand that, but I don't think what we said that night was enough to settle what's between us." He lowered his head, breathing deeply. I've been let down so many times, Emma. I'm scared to trust again, only to fall into another abyss. I'm scared too, she admitted, lifting her hand, almost touching his arm but stopping herself. But what scares me more is walking away without trying, without seeing what we could be, despite the mistakes and pain that haunt us. Nathan was silent. Outside, the wind blew, tossing tiny snowflakes against the window. It was almost Christmas, a season symbolizing forgiveness, second chances, and new beginnings. Emma felt a surge of courage rise within her. "My transfer isn't irreversible," she said, her voice steady but rushed with emotion. "Or I can go and still try to keep this alive. It depends on you, if there's space for an us in some way." Nathan lifted his gaze, an unexpected glint in his eyes. He took a step closer, and Emma could smell the faint scent of his cologne mixed with the lingering aroma of coffee. His emotions seemed to churn beneath the surface. "I don't want you to leave, but I don't want to hold you back either," he murmured, almost whispering. "After everything, I've learned how fragile trust is. If I ask you to stay, will we only end up hurting more?" Emma felt a tear slip down her cheek. "Hurt is part of life. What I don't want is to regret not trying." He reached out and touched her hand gently. The warmth of his touch melted the coldness in the room. "I don't want to regret it either. It was painful seeing everything unravel in lies, but I never stopped caring." Emma let out a shaky smile. Hearing him say he cared was the balm she hadn't realized she needed. She decided to be bold. "I love you, and if you feel anything for me, let's face this together. Whether I stay here or go to the new branch, we'll figure it out. I'm done hiding and lying." Nathan pulled her into a careful embrace, as though afraid she might vanish. Emma felt the heat of his body, his familiar scent, and closed her eyes, letting the tears flow freely. Time seemed to pause. In that silent embrace, there was a promise, a true beginning, forged in truth, and an acceptance of the scars they both bore. When they pulled apart, Nathan reached into his pocket, pulling out a small object wrapped in golden paper. "I bought this weeks ago, but didn't know if I should give it to you," he said hesitantly. "It's a small symbol, something to remind you never to hide your feelings again." Emma unwrapped it carefully, revealing an elegant metal pen that gleamed in the soft light. Her initials, EP, were engraved on it, along with a subtle Christmas detail on the cap. She laughed softly through her tears, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. It was simple yet profoundly meaningful, a new chance to write her future with honesty. "Thank you," she whispered, deeply moved. "I promise to write only truths with it." He smiled faintly, relief evident in his features. "Now I think it's my turn to be brave." Emma tilted her head, curious, but before she could ask, his lips met hers in a tender, deliberate kiss. It was warm, unhurried, dissolving the recent pain and bringing a wave of comfort and joy they hadn't felt in a long time. After the kiss, they stood there, laughing softly, as if they couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Emma slipped the pen into her coat pocket, thinking of all the times she'd written in her notebook about this moment, what it would be like to kiss him without the barrier of lies. Now, it was real. Nathan looked at her thoughtfully. "So, you're really leaving tonight?" "That was the plan," Emma said, wiping her eyes. "But maybe I could delay it, or work something out with HR. It's not set in stone." He held her hand again, guiding her toward the door. "Then go if you have to. I'll be here or wherever you want me to be. We don't have to lie to ourselves anymore. I want to see you come back, or even go with you, if that's what we decide is best." They walked together down the nearly empty hallway, exchanging soft glances. The weight of past anguish seemed to lift with every step. They stopped near the elevator where faint Christmas music played from a distant speaker. Emma rested her head on Nathan's shoulder, feeling a newfound calm. "You know, Christmas got me thinking," he said quietly. "It always feels harder this time of year because we expect everything to be perfect. But maybe Christmas is really about remembering that there's always room for new beginnings, even in the mess." She nodded, squeezing his hand. "We had to reach the bottom to understand that." They walked to the lobby together, hands still intertwined, as if afraid to let go of their newfound connection. Outside, the snow continued to fall gently, illuminated by the streetlights. Emma paused for a moment, savoring the fact that she no longer had to pretend or run. Nathan was by her side, and while the conflicts of the past weren't forgotten, they seemed manageable in the light of a decision made with the heart. He wrapped her in a tight embrace, and she looked up at him, smiling. "So, what do we do now?" Emma took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill her lungs. She didn't know what the next chapters of their story would hold, but they seemed brighter than the ones before. She looked at Nathan, feeling the warmth of joyful tears welling up. "It doesn't matter where I go. What matters is who I'm with. And I choose you, Nathan, today and always." If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.